Thank you for joining us for our Wahine Wellness Ikebana workshop today. It's part of our interactive workshop with Wahine Wellness series of workshops to empower athletic women and girls in Hawaii. So thank you for coming. My name is Melanie. I'm the event coordinator for Samaritan Counseling Center Hawai'i. We're a nonprofit counseling center that provides professional and accessible mental health counseling regardless of someone's ability to pay. So just a few housekeeping reminders. We want to create a safe space where you can be yourself, you can express yourself, feel supported, and most importantly, have fun. Restrooms are outside this door to the left. And then a portion of this workshop will be recorded right here. And we may take some photos, so if you don't want to be in any of those recordings or photos, just let us know. We can take you guys out. At the end of the workshop, we're going to ask you to fill out a survey if you'd like, and we're going to be giving away seashell magnets if you guys want to be part of that raffle. We'll fill it out at the end. We'll have it on the table. And then remember that this workshop is for learning and growing and is not a substitute for therapy. Our presenter today, Mestisa Gass, Program Director at Mental Health America of Hawaii. She's also a board member for the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention Hawaii Chapter, a member of the Mental Health Task Force and Suicide Prevention Task Force, and an advisory board member for the Waipahu Aloha Clubhouse. She has been working in Hawaii since 2006, being originally from Appalachian Mountains. She is passionate about bringing education, support, and resources to all communities, especially rural areas like those in which she grew up. All right, and everybody make a round of applause.
Aloha everyone. I am actually joined today by my assistant. She also happens to be, because I heard all the news, she also happens to be from the Appalachian Mountains. And she definitely has more of an accent than myself, so you get to enjoy that. And she works in plants. And so this is Pam. And you want to tell them where you work and what you do?
I'm actually right now the plant propagator for Wahine Botanical Gardens.
Yeah.
So if you got any questions about Wahine or Foster or Ho'omahia, Cocoa, just let me know. I'll answer what I can.
So I wrangled her in because A, she's family and I can do that, but also B, she's a huge plant enthusiast and professional. So we're going to be talking about a couple of different things today, but really our framework, if you will, is going to be around floral arrangement. So I know we mentioned Sigetsu Ikebana, and the reality is like this is not a Sigetsu Ikebana class, because if it was, then your textbook would look like this. And it would be very detailed and in-depth. We would need measurements and math and all kinds of things. I've taken several years of Sigetsu Ikebana from one of our masters that we have here on the island. Ikebana is just a beautiful form of artwork that is done in the Japanese tradition, and Sigetsu Ikebana is really considered more of that rebel art form. Of course, that's the one I chose. So you have like very traditional forms, but the beauty of Sigetsu and why I kind of lean towards wanting to do that one is because they really emphasize using non-traditional materials in really aesthetic ways. And so they would say, look at something, but look at it with the eye of an artist. And so that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on today. We also wanted to be able to open it up to kind of take some of the lessons that I learned through doing Sigetsu Ikebana and flower arrangement and its application into how it can be beneficial to your mental health. So we're going to be talking about that within the context. That's why we have the worksheets. They're not supposed to be super in-depth. You don't have to fill them out. They're just going to help guide us through our day-to-day as we work on different things. So the first thing I want to do is get to know a little bit more about you. So I did grow up on a farm in the Appalachian Mountains. Always worked in the garden, had a living in the garden. A little bit lazier here because we have smaller space, and so I do a little bit less of it. But then that's probably also what drew me to doing this art form. And hopefully from today's discussion and kind of learning and growing together, we will kind of dive just a tiny bit into that art form, into how working with nature really benefits us with our mental health, with having hobbies, and a place to kind of lean into when times get hard. That's my hope for the takeaway, to look at things in a new perspective. And the first day I brought in all my beautiful foraged flowers, because it can be quite an expensive hobby when you do flower arrangement. But as you also well know, it's a beautiful place that we live in, so there's a lot of places that you can go and forage fruit plants. And most of the people that I took class with were part of like gardening clubs. They had massive gardens of their own homes that they would cut from. They had been doing it for decades, and I just came in and was like, I got these from the side of the road. And I really wanted to lean into the rebel part of Ikebana. And so the entire first kind of series of classes that I did, the entire semester through Windward College, my only goal was to purchase nothing. Like I could not, that was my rule. Could you forage all the materials that you needed to do an entire kind of run of classes and make beautiful arrangements from things you found just in nature? And it was hard. I had to get really creative. And then after doing that, I was like, it could be done. And my sensei, who's an amazing woman, Karen Dirk, she said, you know, you're the first person to ever kind of attempt that. And this just goes to prove that you don't need a lot of money and you don't need beautiful flowers to make beautiful things. You just need to see something in a different kind of eye. And so then when I was like free to purchase things on my own, then I was purchasing wild things to kind of incorporate. And that's going to be our fun for today. So I know you see there's a lot of different things on the table today. We have little miniatures because we could go wild, but we're going to try to be a little bit contained as we kind of work on our flower arrangements. But the first idea that I want you to think about, kind of seeing what's available, but also thinking for yourself, like what brought you in today, is to think about what you want your arrangement to be based on. Because in the world of flower arrangement, especially like the art form of flower arrangement, you never just kind of like dive in. You kind of look at what's available, and then you think to yourself, what is it that's going to be my inspiration for my arrangement? And you'll see that there's a lot of different ideas listed. And so could it be the fact that you're really inspired by, for example, something that's a dry piece, and so you're just going to really work around bringing that, highlighting that one element in your arrangement, and that you're going to be inspired by something on the table? Is it that there's a relationship in your life that you kind of think about? So for example, I did do some arrangements that were based around like my grandparents, because I grew up on the farm. And so I just wanted it to have the same feel as when I would spend time with them. I always did, every year, arrangements specific to holidays. And so that was typically always Halloween. So I'm like, how can I get creepy with this? Had to get really creative. So it could be a holiday, a relationship. It could be a feeling, a place. It just has to be something that you think, that's what I want to create around today. That's going to be my inspiration for today. It's not just about the feeling or the thing that's creating inspiration. It's also about the unique way you choose to represent it. So for some people, they're going to go, I want it to have color, and I want it to have like a mass of flowers, or I want it to kind of have these different elements. But my challenge for you today is to get outside of your comfort zone just a little bit. So pick the pretty thing, but as we know in Ikebana, beautiful flowers don't always make the most beautiful arrangements. What they taught us was, once you pull something out of nature, you will never be able to replicate it as beautiful as it was when you found it. And to try to do that means every time you try to make those arrangements, it just doesn't quite look as good as you like. You're like, it's just not quite there, right? Because we've removed it from its natural position. However, if you then take it and reinterpret it in an interesting and unusual way, it no longer has to kind of hold that same standard. It now can be something completely different on its own. And when you see it, it's your creation. It's a feeling that you wanted to make with it. And it doesn't have to feel like it's just not quite as good as nature. It's just nature re-envisioned. So think about your unique representation for it. What unusual elements will you use? And so I'm going to point out a couple of unusual elements because we have them. This is one of my favorites to use in arrangements because you'll see that some of the things that we want you to keep in mind are things like space and line. Now, you're going to see this and you're going to say, Dr. Jean, how's that going in my flower arrangement? Automatically. But you can take a very simple flower, any sort, I'm going to do dry, it's here. Have that be your primary in your container. You do have things that will help you stabilize it. But then once you start to add different lines and different movements, it starts to expand the way you experience the piece. Went for a little journey. But you can start to create different fields around it by just introducing these unusual elements. And you can start to build outside of what was given. And that's not going to be everyone's taste. But you can start to see with unusual elements that it flows outside of the space of the container. You can pick them up, you can move them around, you can just have them kind of be part of it. You can just introduce this one piece as the unusual because it's dry and we also have fresh. But you can also add in these unusual pieces to your arrangements, and that becomes part of what you see. And you can move flowers through here, flowers through here, but it breaks up the lines. So sometimes when we have our flowers do a nice little mound, we go, that's so pretty, right? But what we want to do is try to also think about how we can pull it up and out in different ways. And this is one of those really kind of fun things that you can just play with all day and just make different shapes with, and it just brings in a little bit more fun texture. So that could be fun. Some of you probably like, no. This is very non-traditional, right? This one is one of my favorites. And you can cut these as short as you need. But how they work is they start to create, again, the height. They start to create these kind of different shapes. And you can tuck them back in, because we have the floral foam, to your floral foam. And you can just make all these kind of different shapes, kind of work with them in different ways, cut them in different shapes, tuck them in, and then you start to get that space and height. You'll need the floral foam to do it, but it's just another way to do it, to add in all these different elements. So something to think about, because we do want you to get outside of your comfort zone. The other thing I want to kind of highlight is the different elements. So you'll see there's the different circles on your page. Now, as you make it, you have your inspiration, you have your unusual item that you're going to integrate, and the next thing you're going to think about is which one of these things you really want to highlight. So are you going to create balance? And balance just means that what is on one side is on the other, what's in front is in the back, that it just looks very balanced. So maybe you have one of our pretty sticks going this way, one going this way, and something in the middle, and it just looks very nice and harmonious. You could focus on color, right? That we really want to emphasize and bring out the aspects of this color or one of these colors, or even keep it very muted, very fall, with some of these more dry colors. Your lines. So lines don't have to be straight, lines can also be curved. And the beauty about using lines in your arrangements is that it allows for you to also create space. So if I have a mass of flowers like this, by simply introducing, for example, turn it this way. Let's say this was my beautiful arrangement. I used all of them at one time. By simply adding in a little bit of line, I now am creating space. I'm creating points of interest that weren't there before, because before was very flat. But just introducing these lines, it starts to be more interesting. Now, is it balanced? Not really, no. Was that my point? No. What I'm doing is I'm starting to add in these different spaces so that the eye is attracted to it. So also realize, as you add in those pieces, that's where the eye will go. So when I start to do things like this, forget what I'm doing. Cram into a jar. I can take a really pretty, kind of muted blue, pair it, and this is where we get a little wild, with an unusual pairing, because you might have thought let me stick with a beige or a brown. But you see how they pop? It really starts to pop because of the opposition of it. The pale with the bright, the deep. And then I can start to do things like highlight the part that I want to be emphasized by arching around it. So now where's your eye go? It goes straight to the blue. If the whole arrangement was mine, I could still have your eye go where I want it to go by simply introducing colors that were unusual to the different places in the arrangement. So then maybe I would go with something pale with the purples, because you would think, oh, but then you lose the contrast, you lose the highlight. So then I'm just going to go back in and choose something that's unusual. And so now I'm creating kind of like tableaus, just by doing the opposite, the unusual paired with it, and creating space where there was none. And as you create these spaces, the eye will pop into each pocket, and you won't lose one particular flower in the arrangement like you do when it's all together. You start to lose focus, you start to lose where you want the eye to go, whereas when you start to add in these other elements, I'm actually highlighting where I want your eye to go. I'm keeping, and this is our big thing today, the viewer in mind. Where do I want the viewer's eye to go? Am I going to create an arrangement where when they see it, it's going to be against a wall, so it doesn't matter what's back here. I want it to splay out here. That's where the eye is. Will it be in the middle of the table? So I want when the viewer walks around it, all sides to look good. Do I want to have movement in it? So we talked a little bit about lines. You can do that with straight lines. You can do that with curved lines. However you choose to use them. You can also manipulate certain elements. For example, so that though your container is small, you can go quite far outside of it, or even manipulate it to again create outside of the container. And so it creates movement, especially if all of your plants go this way. When you start to think outside of the container itself, which is why we chose kind of normal, simple containers, if all my arrangements and all my flowers flow in this direction, that's wind. They're all now flowing this way. Now I can still be traditional, go straight up if I want, or I can just really confuse the viewer and then like create just odd pieces of art in it. And then pop flowers here, or this way, or here, this way. But now I've got space again, where I did it before. I know. When I had the class, I'd be like, I think that's not pretty, right? And I'd make pretty things, and then my sensei would say, we do not work for MTD, that's not what we're doing here today. And I'd say, but it's pretty. And she's like, what we want to do is to create a moment. A moment for yourself, a moment for your viewer, a moment to really get outside of your comfort zone and to create something you wouldn't normally create. We're always tempted to make the beautiful thing. And today we're going to be tempted to make something that's a little bit outside of that block. We talked about some of the other elements. Mass is simply that you're keeping the bulk of something in one particular area. That's all that is. And so at the bottom you'll see in the middle, the example is mass. The container is quite long and flat, but the entirety of the arrangement is pushed to the back of it. It's a mass of things all clumped together. And you can do that if you chose, for example, to do quite a few of these in your container. That would be a mass of one color. So you can see the elements will sometimes work together. So think about those elements. There are quite a few to do. So as we look at inspiration, we talk about the uniqueness, it's now kind of getting more into the fun part. Sit with your idea, and then when you're ready, come up and select your materials that you're going to be using today. There are creative ways for me to approach and get into the different parts of my life, whether they're wonderful parts, difficult parts, And hopefully as you start to look at those different aspects, you'll see them in a different way, because it's about perspective. And in the end of it, you are the viewer for your life. So how do you see it? How do you want to see it? What do you want to create? Is it sustainable? Are you okay if it's not? Take a little risk, make something very beautiful. That's kind of the whole point. These are those. Excellent job, everyone.